Hello, BookTube. I thought, perhaps naively, that we had achieved a measure of peace from the turbulence that was leading us all down the path to another round of hall wars. Things had achieved a kind of uneasy tranquility when all of a sudden there was a gigantic outbreak of more provocation. Coming from young Denson at Robin Song Reads, who did an enormous book haul, a three-part book haul, but the third part that he did with his friend Adam was the biggest of the three. Bags and bags of books, each one designed to taunt me. And in his own defense, Adam pointed this out in the video and said, dude, Steve says he doesn't want us to escalate with more book haul wars, and we do everything Steve says. What are you doing? Denson turned to him and said, forget about him. I hate him because he smells. Let's just do a book haul. And Adam turned to him with a look of shocked disillusionment on his face and said, dude, you've changed. You become a monster. And Denson said, yeah, become one? Or have I always been one? Let's get on with the mail haul, with the book haul. And Adam said, all right, I'll do a book haul, but the next time you stalk, murder, and dismember a suburban family, I'm not covering for you this time. And Denson immediately said, dude, it's YouTube. You're supposed to say unalive. And they proceeded with a gigantic book haul. So I really had no choice but to go to the bookstore today, the Brattle bookshop in downtown Boston, and get a bunch of books. I really had no choice. It's an arms race. I don't want a book gap to widen. And I had a wonderful visit. It is, I don't want to say warm. It's not warm here in Boston. But this last 2 days, for the first time in 2025, so that's going on, 60 days. For the first time every day in 2025 until these last 2 days, I looked at the posted daytime high temperature at Logan Airport and thought, I don't just want that temperature to be higher. I want that temperature to be 100 degrees Fahrenheit higher than it is. So you're telling me it's 2 degrees at Logan Airport. I want it to be 102 degrees. You're telling me it's 6 degrees as a daytime high in downtown Boston. I would like it to be 106 degrees. It's pretty rough. It's one thing if you're looking at, you're going out about your day and you're thinking, well, it's 65. That's a little cool. 75 would be better. That's one thing. But for there to be a 100 degree Fahrenheit gap between what the temperature is and what you want it to be is pretty rough. It's almost extraterrestrial. So it was comfortable physically to be there. And for those of you who are brand new to my channel, maybe have never heard me talk about the Brattle bookshop, that's important because the Brattle, in addition to being a full service, packed and constantly overturning used bookstore, also has a sale lot next door with $1, $3, and $5 books, and it's exposed to the elements. So if it's a brutally cold day, well, I'll still go to the sale lot, but I'll sure complain a lot. And on top of that, I had a wonderful visit. All visits, my visits with Brattle are wonderful, but this one particularly so. I met a viewer of this channel as I was leaving the shop. I saw someone saw me leaving as they were headed there, and I also got into a wonderful conversation in, of all places, the poetry aisle, with a young woman who's writing a paper on the value and the allure of used books. We got to talking about books, and at one point in our conversation, she asked me a deadly question. She said, "Do you have any recommendations?" If the staff at the Brattle had been able to hear someone ask me that, they would all have done that head-slapping meme where they're all slapping their heads at the same time. Needless to say, I did have recommendations. We stuck just to poetry. I didn't go anywhere else, and I recommended some Marianne Moore. Found a nice little trade paperback of some of her poetry, which we've encountered on this channel before, and it is wonderful. It's not cranky. It is not totally idiosyncratic and totally obscure. It's wonderful and beautiful and heartfelt. And a bunch of her prose, which I've also praised on this channel, although unlike her poetry, I think I'm probably the only person in the world who still knows her prose. She's really good at prose, including my own profession. She did for-pay book reviews the whole of her life. Even after she was world famous, she still did that. So for $6 a volume like that, I'll take that as a recommendation. I'm willing to risk it. So that was, in addition to joshing with the staff, that was also it was just a fun visit. Um, and I found a pile of books, just a pile of them, that I lugged back here. Now, unfortunately, the lugging back here, oddly enough, took its toll on a couple of these things in a way that I'm usually careful. I usually pack my legendary leather bag very carefully so that I'm not taking a toll on the books. But unfortunately, not so today. Like this first one, the only mass market paperback. This is the old Signet mass market paperback of the Selected Writings of Walter Pater, edited by Harold Bloom. That old thing there. This was intact when I put it in the bag, but it did not. That corner did not survive. This is he's wonderful, and this is probably a little bit on the irrelevant side, since I'm sure that this exists on Project Gutenberg for free. For those of you who do e-reading, Project Gutenberg is an unbelievable resource of free and extremely neatly curated books. I don't think, just from the length of time, I doubt that, for instance, Marianne Moore is on there. She might be. I haven't looked. Maybe her earliest poetry is. But in your lifetime, she will be there. And so will everybody else. So will everybody else. One by one, every Tarzan novel, etc., etc. This is just a selection of Pater's greatest hits. This, I think, if I remember correctly, I had this volume eons ago. Well, I had it when it first came out. 1974. I think there's a section in here that is just on literary stuff. Yes, and he has, in addition to a really good piece on Charles Lamb, who's now forgotten. There are two good essays, really good essays in that section on Wordsworth and Coleridge, who are going to come up later in this Brattle Hall. So I'll be careful with this. Maybe I'll put a little bit of tape behind that to try and shore it up a little. I don't have any other collection of Walter Pater. I think once upon a time Penguin Classics made a volume. I don't think it was this text. I don't think they play with Signet, but I think they did make a volume of that. I might have that, but I doubt it. I think this might be the only Walter Pater that I have. Although, again, all of it is on Project Gutenberg. I'm sure that everything he wrote is there. Let's see here. Well, that was the only mass market paperback. Then we have two trade paperbacks. The first one is something I've recommended on this channel before. The last time I recommended it, I actually went looking for it on my shelves and could not find it. So I was happy that a copy crossed my path today. This is a YA novel called The Music of Dolphins by Karen Hess. And it is about a little girl who is knocked overboard and into the ocean and lost by the human world. But she is adopted by a pod of dolphins and learns how to live with them, learns how to eat, how to socialize, how to communicate with them, and then is, while she's still very young, she is found again by humans who barely know how to communicate with her. We get that displayed orthographically in the book because her messages, her entries, her narrative is very big and blockish at the beginning. And it gets smaller and tighter as time goes on until finally it's normal narrative. And it's extremely good. This is the template of a story. I love this kind of a template of a story, all the way from Romulus and Remus. When a human is adopted by non-human animals, it's the reverse image of the very popular subgenre where humans adopt non-human animals themselves. Here's where the human gets adopted. The dark side of this book is also something that I've mentioned on this channel before, an old science fiction novel called King of the Sea, in which a man is likewise adopted by a group of dolphins, but it's much darker, more violent. Here, he's out in the ocean, and she's not. She's in a laboratory. And it's wonderful. It's very touching. I'm glad that I now have a copy. And then the other trade paperback, this is what Denson Robinson Reeds was referring to in a couple of videos now as, I think, traveling copies. I'll take that. Jason Harrigan used to refer to them as reading copies. What it means, basically in both cases, is that you have a copy of the book, but you intentionally get a slightly crappier conditioned second copy of the book where you're not worried about getting it wet in the rain or leaving it down in the dirt or leaving it behind somewhere. You're not worried about that. I think ideally all books should be like that, but even I don't think of them that way. So I found a a reading copy, a traveling copy, whatever you want to call it, of this book, Charles MacDonald's book, A Time for Trumpets, which is his history of the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, which he participated in. I love this book. There are better, more forensic, more 30,000 foot, more comprehensive accounts of the Battle of the Bulge. Caddick Adams being the best one, I think. But there's something about this that has it. First of all, it's more eloquent, and also it has more heft. It was written by someone who was there. That's not supposed to matter in the writing of history, and I know that, but it sometimes has a big effect. I think this is a classic of World War II history, and as you all know, if you watch this channel, I don't believe in history superseding other histories. Not if they're written with heart and a certain amount of eloquence. They're a kind of writing on their own. They're not just the latest stock report. So I don't. It isn't so important to me that later histories of the Battle of the Bulge were maybe more comprehensive. That isn't so important to me. And also, I love, who did this? Bantam. I love this cover design. I don't know how many of you will remember, but or have ever seen them in a used bookstore, but for a while there, Bantam did this cover design, a banner of art in the middle of a monochrome cover in trade paperback for a whole bunch of books. I wish I had them all. They did this, for instance, with that big book, Bodyguard of Lies, that I love, and I only want it in that trade paperback. I don't want it like in the big hardcover that I've seen. So there was that benefit too. I mean, the problem with these old trade paperbacks is that the front and back cover are losing the will to live. They're popping off the text box. So I can reinforce that a bit. And then I'll have this as whatever we're going to call that secondary copy. I'm kind of wondering now how many of you do that. Do you ever, those of you who have major book collections, I would imagine that if you have a small book collection, you don't do it. But if you have a major book collection, more than 1,000 books, I wonder if you do this. If you're at a used bookstore and you see, let's say, a well-loved copy of a book that you already have, do you do it? Do you get that? So you'll have a beater copy. I don't know. Let's see. Let's move on. We have, okay, so Time of Trumpets is about the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. Those of you who are not up on your World War II history, Germany is largely defeated in Europe. They can see the writing on the wall. The Allies are in the West. The Russians are advancing in the East. They don't have the material or the men to face either one, much less both at the same time. The cause is essentially lost. And unfortunately for the Allies, they start to think that this is a beaten opponent. We will keep pickets during this horrible winter, but we can wait and coordinate with our Russian allies for the rest of it, for the coup de grace. And the Germans would have put up with that. Even their most fanatical individual corps commanders would have put up with that. But they were led by a lunatic. They were led by a madman. And Hitler thought, well, while the Allies are complacent, this is the perfect time for a major offensive. This is the perfect time for a major breakout to the nearest big river that will get us to the nearest port, that will revive the war in the West. Utter lunacy. Utter lunacy. It relied on so many things. It relied on the Allied troops being basically caught sleeping, and that was true. But it also relied on the German troops being able to seize every single Allied fuel depot that they could get their hands on, including the ones they didn't at the time know about, because they had no fuel left of their own. There was no way that they could do it without that. And doing that would require not only that the Allies were caught sleeping, but that they stayed sleeping after the Germans were advancing. And that didn't turn out to be true. And anyone could have seen that. The number one thing on the mind of German leadership, here I don't want to use the word leadership in connection with Hitler, but the number one thing on the mind of German leadership should have been not, let's break out to Antwerp and kill a whole bunch of Allied soldiers during the winter when they're starting to relax. The key shouldn't be that. The key should be to look at the two alternatives, the Allies and the Russians. The Allies are advancing by street-to-street fighting, stopping us from bombing the bridges over the Rhine, trying to protect farmland, and the Russians are advancing by burning every inch of ground and raping every living thing, including livestock. So if we've got those two alternatives coming in one of two directions, we should be really nice to the good alternative, if we can. The better of two alternatives. Neither one of them is going to save us from the gallows, but the good alternative might save some of us. And they didn't think that. Well, maybe a lot of them did, but Hitler didn't think that. So that is one battle that this book is about. And this next book is about one battle, but it's really about one day of one battle. I found this gorgeous copy of George Stewart's book, Pickett's Charge, which is the pinnacle, the bloody, horrible climax of the Battle of Gettysburg, which I believe, I know it's easy to say, but I believe is the linchpin battle of the American Civil War. Before Gettysburg, it was not over. Even the possibility of the South invading the North was not over. That possibility, again, was lunacy. Absolute lunacy. But as long as the South was willing to make all sorts of mistakes, and Robert E. Lee made a whole bunch of them, when the South was thinking about invading the North, about invading the Union, every one of those thoughts should have been about Washington, D.C., the capital of the Union. Every one of those thoughts should have been about it. Not wandering around in the Pennsylvania countryside. But at the peak of the Battle of Gettysburg, Lee decided, rather than flank his army on either side, one of those flanks was wide open until all the way till the end of Gettysburg, and the commander of the Union forces was new to his position. A flanking maneuver there might have worked, or at least might have given the bulk of the Southern Army a chance to escape. Lee wasn't thinking about that. He wasn't thinking about flanking the army, and he wasn't thinking about escaping. He wanted a head-on conflict. Utter insanity. Utter insanity. And Pickett was the guy he picked to do it. A march across an open field, up a slow incline, a slow, gentle incline, towards fortified redoubts full of Union guns. If you go to the battlefield of Gettysburg, and just stand there and look at it, you will be amazed. You'll be just amazed that anyone could think to do it, much less that anyone would agree to do it when they were ordered to. You will be amazed. You will recoil in your gut if you're ever at Gettysburg and you look at where Pickett's men started, and you look at their destination way over there. If in the 2025, if you picture one person up on that redoubt with a rifle, that alone will make you think, oh, well, no, we're not going to do that. But it wasn't one person. It was thousands of people with rifles and cannons. And yet, Pickett led his men out infamously into Pickett's Charge. It's one of the only, maybe the Charge of the Light Brigade, but it's one of the only military charges that is easily recognizable by its own name and that can warrant its own book. And needless to say, whether you're a Civil War guy or not, whether you know anything about the Civil War or not, they were annihilated. Pickett's division was annihilated. A few people did reach the top of that redoubt, but what good are a few people against an army? Most of them were killed a dozen, 2 dozen at a time. It's an amazing, heartbreaking moment in the American Civil War, and even in the narrative of the Battle of Gettysburg writ broad, which this book is. And it's not just Pickett's Charge. It's a story of the Battle of Gettysburg. It's just the highlight is thrown on this one desperate make or break gamble that actually broke things. It broke the will of the South. The South never tried anything. Lee didn't try anything like this again. He still fought and had his share of grubby, dirty rearguard victories, but Pickett's Charge was that great shining moment where it was proven to be impossible, where all of his idiotic dreams from Chapultepec proved to be impossible. And I haven't read this book in ages. Oh my God. When did this come out? Okay, this came out in 1959. I think I read it 10 years after that, or maybe 20 years after that. But it's really good and really, really eloquent. And some of you will remember, even if you've never read anything about the Civil War, I bet a lot of you have seen Ken Burns' documentary, The Civil War. And the section, the part on Gettysburg, and especially on Pickett's Charge, is really, really well done. So you might remember that. But I'm very happy to have this. I don't have a very big Civil War library. It's books that I really like, or basically that. It's not meant to be comprehensive at all. And this is one of them. As soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, I haven't seen you in forever. So that's your your military history. There's no more military history. We do have lots more history, though. Like, for instance, we can move from military history to Tudor history, which is always fine by me. I found both copies of J.E. Neal's book, Elizabeth and Her Parliaments. So, volume 1 is 1559 to 1581. And then years and years and years later, he wrote this, 1584 to 1601. And this is Queen Elizabeth I dealing with her parliaments. And Neal says the reason that he writes these books specifically is because he says that those dealings were important in an innovative new way. That what we were seeing with Elizabeth and her parliaments, especially the first batch of them, was something new in English history. He got a lot of pushback from that. Not a lot of historians totally agreed with that, but boy, oh boy, are these things good. They're such good reading anyway. Another perfect example of how I don't really care if a history book is up to date or if it's the current favorite in the theory sweepstakes. Not at all if you're telling me a great story. I really wish, I never see it, but I really wish J.E. Neal wrote a biography of Queen Elizabeth I. This is not exactly that. I think in a way this is more interesting because this is the nuts and bolts of Tudor government. And you don't often get that in Tudor books, because they're all so concentrated on the wives or the Virgin Queen or the Bloody Mary or whatnot. This is the nuts and bolts of how Elizabeth governed and the people that she governed with. But Neal also wrote a biography of her that I really wish I had. I really do, but I'll find it eventually. But when it comes to biographies, well, I found one today of Elizabeth's father. I found Jasper Ridley's book on Henry VIII, which I've had before. This is The Politics of Tyranny. That was a subtitle given. This is just a biography of Henry. I don't think the UK edition has that subtitle. And somewhere out there, there is a UK edition, a UK paperback of this that is just Henry VIII, a biographer by Jasper Ridley. How I would love that. I'm never going to be in England again. Never going to set foot on that beautiful, beautiful island again. So I'm going to have to rely on someone lugging that copy over here and dumping it at the Brattle bookshop. Ridley is great. He's really, really good. He's really good readable anyway on any subject. This book is a response to a weird attitude little quirk that I had for a few years ago, that maybe it was a quirk against biographical duplication, that if I have one biography of so-and-so, I don't need more than one. That's crazy, especially if so-and-so contains multitudes and is their government. So gradually I have been filling out a shelf. There are a few people, probably 20 people in history, where I would gladly have more than one biography. I don't need more than one biography of Steve Jobs. Thanks very much. But I do need as many really good standalone biographies of Henry VIII as I can get. And the minute I saw this, I thought, oh yeah, you're one of them. You're one of those books. I will even reread it. Okay, then we're back to, I mentioned that Walter Pater wrote about Wordsworth and Coleridge. We're back to a book that I read. I believe I reviewed this. I'll have to go looking for it. This is Adam Sisman, who we've already seen on this channel for Boswell's Presumptuous Task, his book about the writing of the life of Johnson. And he wrote a book called The Friendship, which is about Wordsworth and Coleridge. I had this once upon a time. Yeah, 2006. I could swear that the publisher, Viking, sent this to me in 2006 as a review copy. One of the first review copies I get after getting back into the business of reviewing. I could swear that's true. I don't know, 2006 might have been too new for me to really be back in the swing of reviewing every single thing. So maybe I didn't review this. I'll have to check and see. But Sisman's great. He's tremendously readable. So, I'm not 100% clear that I reviewed this. I am sure that I read it. But I want to have it because the romantics, right? They nag at me. I feel like I should like them more than I do. I know pretty much everything there is to know about them, but I don't like them as much as I should. I feel like that's true. And this book, it's 2006. That's due for a reread anyway. Okay, then this next one's another biography, a literary biography. This is a little bit of an odd thing. I think this came out before I got back into reviewing. 1994. Oh my God, square in the middle of the Donahue Interregnum. So I would have seen this in bookstores, my own included, but I probably wouldn't have picked it up. I don't think I ever read it. It's Paul Mariani's biography of Robert Lowell. And I'm pretty sure that when I saw this in bookstores in the 1990s, I thought, well, I've read Ian Hamilton's book, which is, a third longer than this. And it's contentious, and I'm not sure that I trust him as a biographer, but I really liked it. So do I need to read another one? And I think this may be a rare lacuna. I think I might not have read this. So I will give it a try. I will certainly read it. Lowell is fascinating. There was a new biography of him called Setting the River on Fire that I loved. I ranked it very highly in that year's best of list. But this is when there were no best of lists. I recently, or years later, I did the Donahue Interregnum, where I went back into the years where I wasn't reviewing books and made a list, an annotated list of the best and worst, or the best books of fiction and nonfiction in that year. But there were so many candidates that I don't think this made the Donahue Interregnum. And the Donahue Interregnum is going to continue. Right now, it goes back to, I think, 1990. Maybe earlier than that, but I will find the cutoff date of when I stopped. I think I went all the way back to 1990, which is when I came back to the world, and came back to Boston. Permanently, it turned out. I think I stopped it there, which would mean, if true, that the Donahue Interregnum should start again at 1989. But anyway, I don't have the Ian Hamilton book. I don't remember the last time I saw it at the Brattle. I do see it there, so when I see it, I will grab one, but I don't know when that will be. Then I found this old thing. This is from, what is the year? It's right at the beginning of the 20th century. It's a heartbreaking year, as you're going to see. 1908. 1908. I found this thing. The Private Palaces of London by E. Beresford Chancellor. This old hardcover here that was part of a library. And what you've got here is pictures, historical and also photographs behind these onion skin dividers of the great London houses. Marlborough House, York House, whatnot. The author starts off with historical spaces that are not extant, or that are unrecognizable in their current place, and then he moves on to houses that are like let me see one, Lansdowne House. You get an actual photo of Lansdowne House instead of just an engraving or an old painting reproduction, and it just gives you the lore associated with each one of these places. The reason why I think the publication date is a little heartbreaking is because a lot of this stuff was reduced to rubble during during World War II, which the author could not possibly have foreseen in 1908. He makes one claim at the beginning here that I thought was quite bizarre, almost insane. There is a difference between these mansions on the banks of the Thames and those on the shores of the Adriatic. The latter have in most instances passed from their once high estate to more utilitarian uses, and their chief glory lies in the beauty of their exteriors. Whereas, if the majority of the London palaces cannot lay claim to such outwardly striking attributes, nearly every one of them contains such a wealth of beautiful objects, pictures, furniture, china, and 1,001 objets d'art, that they may defy comparison with the chateaux of France, or even with the Venetian palazzi in the days of their prosperity. Sheer lunacy. Sheer lunacy. The palaces of London cannot vie with the palazzi of Venice that have Veronese paintings in them, or the play of water, or frolics of trees and little tiny interior gardens where you have no hint they're there until you open a door and find them. But they're in a shaft, a column of sunlight. But still, this is going to be lots of fun to poke through. I love old books like this. The Brattle is a place where I can find them regularly for $3. So I tend to gobble them up. And then the last two things here, we have oversized books. One of which I'm really glad that I found it, because I never keep it. This is John Marslove, who's done lots and lots of good stuff. John Marslove has done lots and lots of good stuff. He did a book called In Search of Meadowlarks that is great. He did a book called Welcome to Suburdia, all about the birds that live in human suburbs and the way they've adapted to human suburbs. But this is his crowning achievement. I love this book more than any others. This is In the Company of Crows and Ravens, with illustrations, black and white illustrations all throughout. Just the illustrations aren't showing you different species. There aren't anything helpful like that. They're just illustrating the narrative. This is co-written with Tony Angel. Or no, maybe he does the artwork. He probably does the artwork. But this is the whole of the corvid world. This is how freakishly intelligent they are, how freakishly obnoxious they are, where they are, how they are in folklore, what they do, what their natural history is, their behavior, that sort of thing. I love this. It's a natural history classic. One of the only books I got today that instantly goes in the little book room. The last copy that I had of this was in the little book room. I can never keep my hands on it. I don't quite know why. Now I have a copy, and that will hopefully stick around. And then the last book is I got it for the pictures and for sentiment. We can dwell on the pictures. We need not dwell on the sentiment. This is Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. There he is. This is a big, extremely illustrated. So you can see by the edge there, all the illustrations all throughout this thing. They're all throughout here of Earth, of our home. And the title refers to Voyager 1, which I guess if you said it really fast would sound like V'ger now, wouldn't it? The title refers to Voyager 1, which was launched and was sent on its way away from Earth to catalog the solar system and whatnot. And then in the beginning of the 1990s, Voyager kept going. Its mission was over. It was about to head into interstellar space, which is about as empty as space gets. Nothing for a Voyager to do. And right before it was about to leave the vicinity of this star, of this solar system, a bunch of people, most especially Carl Sagan, argued that NASA should turn its camera around to take a departing picture of its home. And they did. And the result is, let me see. Well, okay, that's not the whole picture, though. I wonder, surely the whole picture is in here. Right, hang on. I should have looked for this before I started here. The result is a famous picture. It looks like a bunch of falling rays of light, and in one of the rays of light is a tiny little dot, a tiny little pale dot, and that is Earth, seen from billions of miles away. I believe it's the furthest that anyone's ever taken a picture of Earth from. Sagan uses that as an opportunity in this book to meditate on astrophysics, on the Voyager mission itself, on what we know about life in the solar system, or the potential for life in the solar system. He was a big fan of coming up with ideas for how life could exist on other planets. Maybe he saves... Yeah, see, we get imaginative constructions of what settlements on other planets would be like. I got this for the artwork. Just a little bit for the sentiment, but a lot for the artwork. So I want to see if we get the whole picture of the pale blue dot and also the famous bit of prose that goes with it. I'm not sure. Oh, man. Here you have, what if we terraformed an asteroid, gave it an engine, would still protect us from ultraviolet radiation, and maybe it would be dense enough to have some sort of gravity. It'd be just like you to finish this up with... No, you don't finish it with that image, so you must start it with that image. Well, this is the beginning of the book, and that is the image. That is the pale blue dot right there. And there's a famous aria of prose that Sagan gives to that image. I want to see if I can find it so I can read it to you. I don't know. It'd be kind of ironic if it wasn't in a book called Pale Blue Dot. No, there we go. There we go. Yeah, so we get close-ups of the pixel itself, the one pixel where Earth is. I'm going to indulge myself and just read this because this is the only time I'm ever going to mention Pale Blue Dot on this channel. And because I miss its author. He talks about how, the astronomical photos that Voyager has taken don't seem all that special. But for us, it's different. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor, explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that, in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit, yes. Settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. So like I said, there's a bit of sentiment here, but there's also, any book of Carl Sagan's is fine by me, and I didn't have this. I saw it at the shop this morning, and I thought, you don't have this. It's full of his speculation. What kinds of semi-sentient flying pancakes might exist in the upper atmosphere of Jupiter? How did life start on this planet? What might Voyager find out there in the great beyond? It's wonderful. It's fervent and shamelessly geeky. It is designed not only to display its author's surpassing enthusiasm for the wonders of science, but also to communicate them. The greatest science communicator who has ever lived. So I got this. It's slightly oversized, but I'm happy to put it on the shelf. This also is a little bookroom book. But first, some reading, I think, in this. So there you go. That was my Brattle book haul for today. In, once again, an attempt to shore up and send rations to the Maginot Line so that we don't descend into haul wars. This, of course, does not make me an aggressor. So anyway, we have Pale Blue Dot by the great Carl Sagan. We have The Company of Crows and Ravens. At long last, I found a copy for myself. We have The Private Palaces of London, an old book taken out of a library, God only knows how long ago, written before the wars. We have Lost Puritan, biography of Robert Lowell. We have The Friendship, basically a biography of Wordsworth and Coleridge as they got to know each other, help each other, like each other. Henry VIII by Jasper Ridley. Nice big argument-starting biography of Henry. We have Elizabeth and Her Parliaments, 2 volumes. I usually only see one of these, and usually in trade when I'm at the Brattle, and I always tell myself when that happens, well, you don't want just one. You want both of them. So just wait. Sooner or later, you'll see both of them together. I did today. We have Pickett's Charge, about the doomed charge that ended the Battle of Gettysburg. We have A Time for Trumpets, about the Battle of the Bulge, in a walking around copy, a library copy, a reading copy, a travel copy, whatever we're going to call it. Then The Music of Dolphins, an utterly enchanting YA novel about a fish out of water. And finally, The Selected Writings of Walter Pater, edited by Harold Bloom. In in a mass market paperback that obviously is not going to last forever, but mass market paperbacks weren't made to. So there you go. That's a Brattle haul. I'm justifying it not only that I want to forestall hostility, that I want to peace through strength, but also because we're supposed to get a tiny bit of rain tomorrow. And when, as several of you have pointed out, if you give me a wide open week, and in the middle of that week there's a day that's threatening snow or rain, I will probably go to the Brattle right before that. It's an old reflex. Like, the storm could be really bad and I could need a bunch of books. It's a silly reflex. We don't get bad storms in Boston anymore of any kind, and I have plenty of books. But I yield to the reflex anyway. Happy to do it. I had a wonderful visit today. So there you go. There's a Brattle haul for you. I will wrap this up for now. I will leave a link to Robin Song Reads' rabble-rousing video with his dragging his innocent friend Adam along for the terror. Just so that you can see their great haul. Oh my God. You put all three of the parts of his epic book haul together, he has built a very good core of a lifelong library. Amazing. At a library book sale, so you know it wasn't a lot of money. Wonderful. Not that I want any of the rest of you to do it. Let's not have any more book hauls. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.